Welcome to the Property News Show, where every week we bring you news from the markets that affect property investors and landlords in the UK. As always, I'm joined by Mark Homer, co-founder and director of Progressive Property and a property investor himself. Mark, do you want to just quickly tell us where everyone can find and follow you online?
Yeah, so progressiveproperty.co.uk, and you could go on my Facebook profile, or you could have a look on Twitter, but most of it would be on our Progressive website.
Cool. You got a podcast as well?
Yes, of course. Mark My Words, which is on Apple and Stitcher.
Fantastic. We've got three news stories today. We're in the middle of an election here in the UK, so there's still lots of things to pan out, but there's obviously always stuff going on. So our first story today, Mark, we've got a story of a landlord that was forced to pay £150,000 in safety fines over several series of fines due to safety failings in their property. Obviously, you know, they are the ones at fault here, but what do you think this means? You know, does this show that you really should be investing in the safety of your property? How close can you, ride that line? How do you, deal with the safety within the properties that you own?
I mean, I just don't think this is that complicated. You've got to do your gas safety check. You've got to make sure that the building complies in terms of fire. You could get hold of LACORS, which shows you, all about your fire escapes, emergency lighting, if you're doing HMOs, the smoke detectors, are they interlinked? Do you need fire doors? Do you need overdoor closers? All that sort of stuff is laid out, and it's pretty simple. And if you don't want to read that document, you can get a sort of fire safety consultant to come in and have a look at it all, make all the recommendations. Whether it's a single let or a HMO, you can quite easily do that, and then you just follow what they tell you to do. Lots of councils are licensing, and clearly the licensing officers will also help you and show you, what you need to do. Often you need to spend some money to bring it up to standard. Not always, but it isn't loads of money, and it's just not that complicated. If you've got, fire alarms, if they're bigger buildings, you need to test those periodically. Usually with councils, if no one's got hurt and they find that a property, even if it's disastrously dangerous, they'll come in and they'll offer advice before they prosecute, and they'll usually give you time to put it right, and they actually have to consult with you. It's part of their part of their guidelines. So I don't have a lot of sympathy. No.
It's got to be quite severe to get to this point, obviously.
It has.
And have been ignored several other times.
Yeah, they'll have come in, they'll have gone, right, we found this, this and this is the issue, you need to sort it out by this date. They'll have, then, if you haven't done it, they'll have probably gone, right, we need to serve an official notice. Then if you haven't done it, they'll have given you some more time. So they'll have had loads of warnings, and then eventually it's got to court, and they've ended up with £150,000 fine. And the worst thing is all the negative publicity that comes from that.
For the landlords and
the landlords,
industry in general.
And the industry, and if they want to go and borrow money, the bank sees that, they're not going to be happy. If they're going to want to go and get a license, they might not be fit and proper anymore, so they might not pass the test, might not get a license to do it. There are and if they want to do JVs or work with the landlords, they're going to see it's pretty much bad from every angle. And then that comes after one of the most important bits, which is someone could die in there. Someone could get electrocuted. That doesn't happen that often, but fire, that does. Buildings burn, and people get trapped, and they inhale smoke, or that's usually why they die, or less so from flames. Do you really want that on your conscience, that someone's died because of the fact they couldn't get out of your building or whatever?
Yeah. So I guess you'd always say, although there are ways you can be more efficient and save money when you're being a landlord, you should never try and save money and cut costs with the safety of a property.
Well, you can cut costs with it. You can do what is necessary rather than what's, sometimes you'll get some fire consultants round or others who will tell you to do things that are not necessary because they don't understand the rules for that tenure type or that type of building. So it is really worth also cross-checking with LACORS, and if there's maybe, I tell you what's really good, we've often get the fire brigade out to look at a building, and sometimes they don't always agree with what the council say or with what your fire consultant says. But if you get a model and consult all of those three, you normally work out what you do need to do and what you don't, and then you can obviously ditch all the irrelevant stuff. Example, if you're doing an apartment building, often you need a full panel fire system between the flats, but not always. If it's a smaller building, or maybe the escape routes are not that long, it isn't necessarily necessary. Fire extinguishers. Most councils will tell you in a HMO to put fire extinguishers in. If you get the fire brigade round, actually locally here, they tell you to take them out. They don't want them because they don't want the residents to be encouraged to stay and fight the fire.
Right,
so,
okay.
And I just think the local councils are catching up with what the fire brigade are saying. So there is money to be saved by not buying unnecessary items, and also, it depends where you get this equipment from. Are you using the right supplier? Is the margin on margin on margin? LNPG is very good. So you don't have to waste money. You can put the right stuff in, not spend outrageous amounts, and just put in what is necessary to protect people.
But that comes to getting the right advice in the first place.
Yeah, another one. Favourite of electricians is to come round and go, oh, it doesn't meet the building regulations. Even if you're not doing a major conversion or major building works. Well, it actually doesn't need to. It just needs to meet the building regulations from when the building was built or last converted or major works were done. What it needs to do today is have a electrical safety check done, NIC check, to make sure it's safe. Just because it doesn't meet the building regulations,
the current regulations,
the current edition, it doesn't need to. So don't let them fool you with that. So understanding all this sort of stuff to navigate.
So I guess, as landlords, it's about being informed and getting advice from the right people.
That's it.
Because, there will be people out there who will make their money doing fire consultancies.
Asbestos removal.
Well, you've had this issue recently, haven't you?
It's an absolute racket.
The importance of getting multiple quotes so that you don't get ripped off. All of that kind of stuff.
Gas safety check, you need to come around, make sure it's safe. The boiler needs to be safe, the whole system needs to be safe. Often that's an opportunity for plumbers just to say things are not safe when they are. And you need a whole new heating system. Well, if you end up with a plumber like that, just go and get another quote and don't let them collude. And then see what the next gas engineer tells you, and then compare. And if they're telling you something completely different, get a third one out. And then if there's two that agree, then you've probably got to the truth.
Yeah. You mentioned LACORS. Will you just tell us what that is quickly? Yeah,
it's a document. It's a document that comes from, pretty sure it's a government issued document. And in there, it's very detailed in terms of fire safety and what fire safety requirements apply to each different building type.
Okay.
So you might have apartment buildings, you might have HMOs, commercial buildings. There's diagrams, there's pictures, it's great, and I love it because you can read it, work out, because it's correct, work out what the rules are, and then when you get challenged by a licensing officer says, it's this, or the escape, a typical one would be the window, needs to be 1.1 or less, so that people, to be used as a fire escape, to crawl out of it. I've had officers and other people tell me, give me a different number, or it can't be used as a fire escape. And all I do, I get LACORS out, have a look, just highlight it all and go, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And then sort of 5 minutes later, they usually just go, okay, I think that point's dealt with. And then we're on to the next thing, So it's very useful finding official documentation like that.
And that will be available on .gov, I assume?
Yeah. Or just type in LACORS, LACORS, into Google, and you'll get the latest version.
Okay, thank you very much. So our second story is talking about the future of the rental market and the further diversification in how that stock is used, specifically flexible renting. So traditionally people think of a buy-to-let as a long-term home for a family or a couple. Maybe 6, 12 months, maybe longer. Obviously, in the last few years, there's been a big change in how people want to rent. You've seen short-term and holiday lets through service accommodations, Airbnb, places like that. but also a bigger increase in the demand for short-term places to stay for, say, contract workers, for building or hospitals. So, Mark, what do you think about this? Do you think that's a trend that's going to continue? How diverse is your stock? Do you use the same houses for multiple different things, or do you try and keep them split up?
We usually try and keep them separate. Clearly, the fabric of society is changing. People are moving around a lot more for work. We'll get builders or retail workers or managers into our apartments or houses, and they may be staying for a few weeks. So that's a specific tenure type. It's a nightly rental, or known as a furnished holiday letting, according to HMRC. So there's a lot of those would rent through Airbnb and Booking.com and those types of places. So there's that stuff is there's a demand. That's necessary. Clearly, with your more 6-month AST, assured short hold tenancy, where it's less transient. People are moving in often. They're furnished. The average tenancy length is over a year. I'd say with our houses, it's more like 2 years. Apartments would be a bit less. But often those properties could be used on a nightly rental basis, or as a furnished holiday let on a nightly basis, on a 6-month basis or on a nightly basis, without the requirement for planning permission to move between the two, as long as it's outside central London. So I think all this stuff is becoming more and more relevant. People are using stuff shorter term. They're more footloose. People are renting cars, aren't they? We're moving. We're renting phones, and clearly there's more rental and flexibility in the tenure type of residential accommodation. It's happening with commercial as well. Obviously, people are going into places with desks, and they're renting a desk, and then they're moving around.
The whole WeWork scandal, isn't there, over the summer?
Yeah, I mean that was coming. I got mates in private equity, one in particular, who we sat down 18 months ago, and he's doing that sort of stuff, and he's getting a lot of the WeWork. Was getting a lot of the WeWork customers through charging less, and he just used to sit there just going, mate, WeWork is going to explode like you've never seen. And he was saying this 18 months ago. I'm surprised he didn't short it all. So I think the writing was on the wall.
Well, that's a scandal in itself, isn't it?
It's just, I don't know, it's like the .com boom. It's just ethereal and just comes out of nowhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're off topic slightly, but WeWork is one of those, it's effectively a property management company that had styled itself as a tech company and was getting treated and valued in the same way these tech companies do.
Clever guy.
But it was just a property management company. That's all it was. But, and it got this something like 46 billion valuation before they, were going to, go on the stock exchange.
Clever salesman.
All fell apart.
Yeah.
I mean, they cut something like 12,000 jobs, and he walked away with, I think, $3 billion in severance. So, I mean, that's a whole other subject, the usage of what could have previously been office space that could have been converted into these flexible working spaces. But so do you think, obviously some of these things are quite new, like serviced accommodation, it's been obviously around for a long time, but it's increased in popularity significantly in the last few years. And obviously, I think a lot of people would say that regulation is still catching up with the pace of the market.
Probably, yeah.
And there's still stuff coming in.
Yeah.
Do you think over time you're going to see specific landlords specialise in one form or the other? Obviously, you dabble in you've got HMOs, you've got flats, you've got single lets, you've got serviced accommodations. But do you think as it becomes more, there is more red tape for each one, you think people will specialise?
Yeah. I think there is the best operators do usually specialise.
Yeah.
But usually they've gone up through the ranks and they'll have a little bit of
everything.
Yeah. So we've got some of all of that, but I tend to go quite deep on a strategy for a number of years and then move on to another when
you've kind of cracked that one.
Yeah, or that doesn't work or whatever. So clearly specialism is the way forward, because the difference between a really good operator offering a great service, a great nightly rental, clean property, really nice interior design, well marketed, and someone that isn't is a really profitable business and one that makes a loss. So yes, but I know lots of landlords that will be doing a little bit of everything, because when you go round and view properties to buy them, some are good for one thing and others are good for another thing.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be
Do you think
loads of stuff up.
Obviously there's been a lot of controversy over the last few years with Airbnb, and its competition with the hotel market in places, especially places like London. And as we mentioned, like the regulation is still catching up. Do you think there is a risk that people could overinvest in service accommodation and then there be introduced to very strict regulations that makes that not viable? Would you suggest that people be wary at all, or do you think that's something that the market's just going to roll with regardless of what happens?
Well, it's happened in London, hasn't it? In central London, you're allowed to rent Airbnbs for a maximum of 3 months. Do I envisage more regulation? Yes, I would have thought there will be. There'll be legislation comes out to control these in some way. They're exempt from Section 24 at the moment. That may change. So, I think that will come. It's inevitable, but as a landlord and as a business person, your job is to navigate this stuff. That strategy might not work that well, for a while, so you need to change it, modify it, and just
I guess it's about staying educated and staying flexible as well, so that you're able to move to another strategy if you need to.
Just being flexible in business and understanding where the opportunity is and being able to change, being able to think about what you were doing and work out maybe there's a better way and amend your process.
Okay. So our last story today is a story about flooding. So obviously, very recently there's been some severe flooding. It's affected a lot of people. According to the story, there's over 5.2 million homes in the UK that are at risk of flooding to some extent. Some of that might be extreme, some of that might be small. Mark, what would your advice be to someone who was thinking of starting investing in an area that's prone to flooding? Have you got any experience with that, or what advice would you give?
Yeah, so it's not a major problem around here, but clearly there are areas that flood, and it's becoming more predominant with climate change. I think it will become more and more of an issue. You can go on the Environment Agency website. There are lots of tools that will tell you the likelihood of an area flooding and how often it will happen in a number of years statistically. Now, just because it's reasonably elevated on that scale, it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No,
and clearly you can insure against it. So the best thing to do is to put the postcode in on a sort of buildings insurance website to work out if the insurers see it as a major issue. If they'll insure it at a reasonable rate, it's probably not a major issue.
Because you're going to be covered if something does happen.
Yeah, so I'd probably go ahead on that basis. If it's, I know there's one area of Peterborough, sort of near the Boathouse pub. A lot of stuff was built there. Every year it floods, along the road out there. So there are issues, and I think they have problems getting insurance. In terms of ways around it, clearly water's water.
There's not a lot you can do.
It'll find its way in, and it's pretty horrendous, clearly. So if an area, if it does flood a lot, I wouldn't buy that, because you're just going to have a load of grief and all sorts of hassle with the tenant moving them out and trying to rehouse them. And
there's easier ways to invest
than
to look for these properties.
Yeah, of course. But just because people think that there's a predominance of flooding in an area, you need to check to see if that's actually the case, because you might end up with a very cheap property. But actually it's still insurable, not too much of an issue, because that one is elevated enough. Whereas
and that'll be the difference between the hearsay of everyone saying, oh, that area floods all the time, and actually doing the proper research and looking at that information.
How high is that property?
And being able to make an educated decision rather than a decision based on the stuff people are saying.
The Daily Mail.
Awesome. Okay, that's everything we have for today. So again, Mark, please just let the guys at home know where they can find and follow you.
progressiveproperty.co.uk or Mark My Words Podcast, or I'm on Facebook and Twitter.
Thank you very much. Please remember to like and subscribe. We love reading all of your comments. If you leave a comment below, we like hearing your views and what you think of the show so far. We're going to be back again next week where we're going to be getting ready for talking to Mark about his plans for 2020 and what he's going to be doing in property. So we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.